Ladies and gentlemen, angry Americans around the country and around the globe, I am absolutely thrilled and honored and excited to have a very inspiring, important, and iconic guest, a person I have admired and worked with, and most of all, like there are a lot of people in the media that I've worked with that frankly I don't like, and our guest today is someone that I think is not just a tremendous journalist, but a tremendous person. And I am very, very happy to have with us today the great and powerful Brooke Baldwin. How are you, my friend?
Oh, you like me? You really, really like me? I like you too. I like you too, man. I've liked you for a long time. I've known you for, I don't know how many years it's been, but so cool. So cool to have you.
It's been like almost, at least a decade and a half. I think the first time I came on your show. And it's been really exciting to see your rise and your journey.
Thank you.
And like the no shit, you keep it real. Like, you know, we've been out at events and had drinks and off camera. You're very kind and generous. And I think that comes through in all of your work. So especially with all that's going on in the world, in your world and the world, thank you. Thank you for making the time to join me on the show.
Of course. And no, it's just been awesome having you on and going to, previous IAVA events and having, your men and women in military on the show. So just, thank you so much.
Of course. So first of all, the question I've been asking everybody since the pandemic started, where are you? And I always ask everyone, how are you? And this is a particularly important question for you. Where are you? How are you? And what has it been like for you and the people close to you during this pandemic?
Thank you for asking. And it's also just, I think, just given the coverage of everything else in the world in the last week, it's like, what pandemic? But we are in the middle of a pandemic. And hello and welcome to my glamorous CNN office, where, yes, I keep my colorful CNN anchor wardrobe behind me. I just finished my show like 25 minutes ago. And yes, we are here in the building in New York City. I think a lot of people think we're just like hanging out in our, homes with a home studio. And no, we show up and we're in these, you've been in many of them, Paul, like flash studios, which is sort of like a little bit more than a glorified broom closet. And you got one camera and no one else is in there just for sheer safety reasons. And you rock and roll for the show, and there's literally no one else in this building other than a couple correspondents and bosses over in the New York bureau and in CNN Digital, because we're all being so totally safe because of coronavirus, which I had. God, what month are we in now? What month are we in now, Paul?
We just hit June.
Okay, so I
just hit June. Yeah.
I got sick 2 months ago right now. So first week of April, and I can tell you all about it, but I'm so much better. I'm totally back to 100%. Thank goodness.
I want to go deeper into that as we expand this conversation. But for folks that don't know, I think it's interesting to hear that behind the scenes, because I remember, the last kind of week or 2 weeks of going to CNN, of going to MSNBC and others and debating, like, do I go in? Can I do it from home? And then there was one point where I did, an interview with Cuomo from my wife's closet. And then after that, everybody's
like an actual closet.
Yeah, an actual closet, her shoes behind me and like all kinds of crazy shit.
Nice.
But now you guys are also in Hudson Yards, which is this monstrosity of a mini city within New York City, in the new CNN Time Warner building, which is big even when it was open and rocking and rolling. So, especially now after this week of looting and protests, what's it like in that neighborhood, which was kind of frankly like a bit empty before this started, because you had these luxury shops that tourists hadn't found yet, and it was probably like maybe the newest part of New York City. What's it like there in Hudson Yards?
Yeah, no, you described it perfectly, like this city within a city, and it's felt sort of no man landy before everyone's been moving in, and slowly but surely, we've got all these fancy pants shops in this building and in restaurants and things. I will say that it's been, obviously in New York City, you never think of New York City as a quiet place, but it's been extraordinarily quiet, and especially in our little pocket of town. And then, with the looting, which is a small sliver of this huge story, but I walked into work yesterday and, the security guard there, the security is around and police is around. And there was part of right when you walk in the front door of CNN or Hudson Yards, the mall area was shattered. So it had been hit. So now there's
they actually got inside. They got inside to the mall.
I don't think they got inside, but they shattered one of the glass doors. So they've now put some plywood up around the front, and now to get in the building, it's even more secure, and you go in a back way, which I'm not going to give you the secret password, but you can obviously get in the building, but they're just being extra cautious, and fingers crossed that piece of all of this, that element is over.
So a question I ask of everyone, and I think is especially interesting, given your other role as a co-host on the New Year's Eve coverage from CNN. Which I always love, and I think really shows people like a real side of you.
Yes.
And Don, who's known to like a drink or two as well.
We let our hair down.
Yeah, but I ask all our guests, what is your cocktail or adult beverage of choice?
I was thinking, I was marinating on this. I mean, I could give you several. I think my go-to is just some good old-fashioned bubbly. But if I had to pick a cocktail. Lately, I've been, how you go through phases. I'm just a straight up vodka, martini, dry with a twist. Serve it to me in a cool martini glass. I'm a happy gal.
I was excited about having this part of the conversation. And I actually, in anticipation of that, I got a glass of champagne.
Oh.
I'm at an undisclosed location, so it's not my house exactly. But I didn't have a champagne glass. I have a lot of old stuff here, as anyone who's been following the show knows. So the best I could do was some Prosecco that we had. And
you're just going to drink in front of me like that?
I'm going to toast to you, because I think it's a very trying time in America. It's obviously an emotional, heart-wrenching time in America. But part of this show is about turning the anger into positive outcomes and trying to find ways to celebrate the things that are worth celebrating. This yesterday morning, a little nest outside of our kitchen window had 3 robin's eggs in them, and now there's 6 there. But I also, as a friend, as a fan, you are healthy, and I think that's worth toasting to and celebrating.
Hold on, let me get my other kind of sparkly.
There you go. So I appreciate you, and I'm glad you're healthy.
Thank you.
And to see you approach that really difficult situation with the same candor and humility and openness you always do was really, really inspiring, I think, and gave people inspiration and peace, and just kind of broke it down in a way that was really, really, I think, important. But going in the way, I want to stay in the way back machine, because you've had a great journey that's taken you throughout the South mostly, right? Yeah. And you're a big North Carolina fan, I know.
Go Heels.
And you've covered the South, you understand the South, you're from the South. But when you were growing up, Brooke Baldwin, what was your first car?
Oh man, my first car. Well, okay, so I learned how to drive on my mom's boat of a Buick station wagon. So picture, 15-year-old going on 16, Brooke, having to pass the test. I mean, like, what I'm talking about, where you get to sit, backwards in the back seat and sort of make gestures at cars behind you, and your parents are screaming at you in the front. That was technically my first car, and that is how I learned how to parallel park. And then soon after having a job, I think I made a couple $1,000s, which bought me sort of a mid-80s BMW, like two-door baby blue 3 Series BMW, which looked really cool. But then as I was rounding 285, for all the Atlantans listening, it just totally conked out on me. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well,
man, you're bringing me back.
I want to stay on the Buick. Do you know what year it was and what color it was?
Let's see. We would have gotten it when I was in middle school, so maybe 1990, and it was that navy blue stripe wrapped around it, and the rest was just wood. So wood and the navy stripe. Yeah. And I remember begging, I remember when, big Buick station wagons were the jam, and I thought I was so cool, rocking out, pumping up the Pearl Jam, Brooke at 16 driving around Atlanta. I just thought I was the coolest thing until obviously some of my other friends, did me one better with whatever they were driving. But I mean, if you think about all the people you could pile into a Buick station wagon and rock out and go a little too fast.
Yep.
Sorry, Mom. It was awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I did it. I knew it was going to be a great answer, but the idea of the wood with the kind of, I guess it's not a racing stripe, but it's like a wagon stripe. We had a Chevy station wagon for most of my life growing up, like before there were SUVs, and we had the way back seat, right? And my father used to have a trailer hitch so that we could tow things. And at that point, that was like, there were no SUVs, there were no big truck. Later, we got a Blazer and things like that. But the station wagon had the big V8 too, and we could pack all the kids and all the shit in it. And you could put stuff on top, and the station wagon was the jam. You're right.
It was the jam in the 90s. Like kids these days, what they don't know about riding backwards in a car, man. Everybody piling in a minivan or a fancy Suburban. Yes. They don't know what they're missing.
Yes, before there were, limos and before Uber drivers were putting up, panels to protect you from the virus, my brother and I were in the back seat doing shady shit with like a blanket up. And my father, long drives to Pennsylvania and Maine and
truck drivers.
What the hell are you guys doing back there? Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Well, all right. I knew this was going to be so fun to talk to you.
Yes.
But I want to bring it back to the conversation we've been having on this show is with leaders who have been on the front lines of the pandemic. And now it's expanded almost into like a two-front, I don't want to use the term battle space like Esper did, but a two-front landscape where you've now got the protests and the riots and the demonstrations kind of overlaid on top of the pandemic. But I want to really stay on the pandemic because I feel like for at least for the last week, people kind of forgot there is one.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
But you are in a really unique position. And it's why I was so looking forward to talking to you, because you were experiencing the pandemic in a very personal way while you were covering it, while you were kind of shaping it, which I've tried to explain to others. Like, I'm not just living in the pandemic, I'm also covering it, and then I'm trying to influence it. But you took it one step further where you had it, right? You were one of the first public people, in the media who got the virus. So you've talked about it, you've written about it, but for folks that maybe haven't had a chance to hear you talk about it, or now that you've had space to think about it, what do you want people to know about that experience, Brooke? And what are your takeaways at this time?
Man, thank you for asking me about that. And it was a couple days after your boy Cuomo got sick. I mean, it's a funny thing when you're a journalist, and I knew I'd be covering, one of these stories of my lifetime, this pandemic, something I had certainly never experienced, and was so just like on the ready every day, interviewing nurses, doctors, folks who've lost loved ones. And maybe it's being a little bit naive. I just wasn't thinking that, oh man, I'm going to get socked with this nasty virus, which is exactly what happened. And I remember feeling like shit and literally sitting in this office, and it all started coming on. But you know how we do the thing where if you don't acknowledge it, it's like back in the day when you showed up at work, I know I shouldn't say this, but when you're like super hungover in your young 20s, and you're like, all right, if I just don't tell everyone I'm hungover, then I'm cool. Like, I'm going to get through this work day.
Right.
It's been years. So it's like, I was feeling so sick, but if I didn't acknowledge it, I could get through the show and I'd be fine. It would go away, but it didn't. And long story short, I got tested. I was fortunate to get a test, and it came back positive. They did the whole thing way up your nose. And I think, yes, it was awful. And, I was one of the lucky ones. Like, I was nothing like in the hospital on a ventilator, those extreme, circumstances, and going to the hospital, seeing, not to take a total, grim turn, but it's also a very real part of it, is seeing the refrigerated trucks outside of the hospital and knowing exactly what was inside. And so for me, it was horrible, fever, aches, that kind of thing, exhaustion. I slept like a teenage boy, would wake up at noon, wake up to have some yogurt, go back to sleep for a couple of hours kind of thing. And My husband and I tried to social distance for 2 days. That didn't last because I was just really upset. And I think Cuomo referred to it as the beast. It is like at night, this like night beast would come on and I would just weep, I would weep because I just never would know how bad it would feel any given night. And it was a roller coaster, kind of like, you get the flu and you're like, damn, I'm out for 5 days, but then I'm going to be fine. And this is like, all right, day 1, 2, 3, not horrible, but oh God, like 4, 5, 6, the worst I've ever felt. 6, 7, okay, I'm going to be done with this. 8, 9, 10, the worst. So I remember it was right around Easter where I felt like I turned the corner. And I think my biggest, and I'm totally okay, got my taste and smell back, although I was like housing some pretzels and jalapeno dip, and my husband was like, what? And I think some days some days I don't taste as well, but I think my biggest takeaway is, normally our lives are full of distractions and stuff on a calendar and kids or people pulling on you to do 8 million things, and so you just don't, for me at least, you have to be very intentional about stopping and thinking about yourself or your, joy or whatever makes you tick or what you want to do or your passions. And so that was a forced nearly 2 weeks. And it really for all of us, just sitting with ourselves at home for months where I was like, dang, I just had thoughts about why don't I go to just simple things like, why don't I go to the beach more? Or I'm going to call up my mom and she's had this treadmill collecting dust and I love her. And she keeps talking about working out and I know what working out does for me. So like, Mom, let's roll. And also just outside of my own day job of being a journalist, I want to continue. I really try to shine a spotlight like you do for veterans. I try to do for women, and I want to create separately, inspirational television for women. So those were moments I had. And just lastly, like connection, and I think we've all appreciated. I mean, I bet people listening are, they've talked to folks they graduated college with that they haven't talked to, or friends they haven't been in touch with. It's been a remarkable time for just realizing how important connection is and how to, feeling very vulnerable. I think vulnerability, like real, true, raw vulnerability leads to full fulfillment and connection.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing it during your journey. I know that it brought strength to other people. I know it brought a reality check for many people. You and Cuomo are both fit people. You're relatively young, you look to be healthy, and to see you both,
relatively young.
Yeah. I mean, compared to the president, for example, right? Or like everybody running for president, basically. But when I watched it hit you guys, I think it was really important because like, this is a really big reach, but I felt like when the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was happening, people didn't really connect to it unless they had a personal connection until Pat Tillman died.
Yeah.
When Pat Tillman died, he was somebody that they thought they knew or they rooted for or they understood. And it just created like a really different clarifying personification of the moment, or personalization of the moment.
Personalized it.
Yeah. And I felt like, Cuomo did that on some levels, but frankly, Cuomo is a lot more polarizing than you. Cuomo's got more haters than almost anybody I know. I back him up on the radio. I see it. And I love Chris, but he's also a guy that I think, tends to divide people. I don't know too many people who don't root for Brooke Baldwin. And especially as a younger woman, to see you out there facing this and just your emotional honesty. One of my mentors taught me about powerful vulnerability. And I think that's something that you've displayed throughout your career, and especially during this, Brooke. Like, I felt like watching you go through this and then seeing you respond, maybe it was like watching your own funeral from afar. Like, you had such an outpouring of support that I hope you felt the love. And I hope to know that you really inspired people. And I think that, I hope some people will remember that experience and will take it more seriously, right?
That's so sweet of you to say. And yeah, I mean, when I started hearing, I know I have friends, I know I have some folks that like me, but man, I mean, that whole experience, I was overwhelmed. I would literally, like, this is probably TMI, but I would sit in the bathtub when I had my aches, because I would sit in hot water to try to distract myself from it. And that is when I would allow myself for 20 minutes to bring my cell phone in the bathtub to start thanking all of the people. It just took me a really long time, but I wanted to make sure if people took the time to reach out to me, then damn it, I wanted to make sure I was saying thank you. And so initially, I think I felt, you know, not to get all Brene Brown on this situation, but incredibly vulnerable. And then I just like leaned into vulnerability. And I think to your point about that, like when you lean into vulnerability, man, the outcome of that, and thank you for the compliment on being authentic, but I also just feel like people are effing smart. You know, they know when somebody's trying to pull the wool over their eyes and not being real versus not. And it's the biggest compliment when people meet me and they're like, wow, you really are the same person I see on TV, and vice versa.
Yeah. So, I think that's true of you more than almost anybody I know in the media. And it's refreshing, especially in times like this, that authenticity is important. And that, you know, that even extends to your coverage of, you know, the recent chain of events. And you've covered protests. And I think you also, you know, bring a unique viewpoint as someone who grew up in the South, who understands the South. And, you know, I lived in Alabama, I've lived in Georgia, I've lived in other places when I was in the military. And to see that as someone who's there is a very different perspective. But you approached it with a very, I think, delicate and thoughtful perspective. But, you know, from the standpoint of a journalist, but also an American, what do you think of this moment? Right? Like this moment of protest, this moment of eruption, this moment of pain that's compounded on that other moment of pain. Now you personally have come out of one and now you're going into the other. And, you know, frankly, you're now in another crosshair because protesters went into the headquarters of the place you work in your hometown, right? So it's come kind of full circle, and to see it hit, you know, where you grew up in Atlanta. What are your thoughts on this state of affairs right now?
No, I'll just start there. I mean, that was last Friday, and yeah, I mean, I'll say a couple of things. One, you know, waking up Friday morning to my dear friend Commander Bobby Jones, who was just couldn't get over the fact that three of our correspondent, producer, and cameraman had been arrested live on television. And in the same course of the day, you know, having our precious CNN Center in Atlanta looted was gut-wrenching. But I have to check that on the one hand, because I am very aware that I am a white woman, and I am very aware, and I'm educating myself on becoming more aware, quite honestly, of just white privilege and white fragility. And I think this whole moment, I hope, Paul, it is truly an awakening for people in this country. And I say that for folks who have the shade of skin color as mine. I think that growing up in the South, I heard the N-word. I did. And folks in my family or larger family, they may not have always wanted to watch CNN. They might have checked out the other folks. And I am grateful for coming from that background, because I grew up and my mom was always like, Brooke, you should be a judge, because my thing was always listening to, like, you know, like you, like listening to left, right, and sort of landing somewhere in the middle. And I have obviously formed my own views on the world and the justice system, but I think over the course of the past couple of months, to know that how this country was founded, you think of slavery, then you think of the generations of violence that Black and brown people in this country have suffered. And then you add to it COVID, which has disproportionately impacted and killed Black and brown Americans, and then the killing of George Floyd. And back to my point about, you know, clarity and quiet with oneself. We all have been sitting at home, right? And then all of a sudden, this man is killed with officers' knees on his neck. And you hear in the video, you know, one of the officers is like, he's not responding. I'm not feeling a pulse. Like, let's turn him over. And the lead officer says no. In broad daylight, with bystanders saying, you know, stop, and he's not breathing, and calling for his dead mother.
Right.
And that just should shake anyone to their core. And I hope, as Benjamin Crump, the attorney, said today, that this is the tipping point. This is the awakening moment, that this means that because now these 4 officers have been charged, that will hopefully lead to justice. And I won't get into a whole spiel on proving intent and second-degree murder, but there's a journey of justice in this case that we're all about to take part in. But I hope that in the end, this is the beginning of real systematic change in this country that folks like me, who look like me, have never had to worry about. Cop pulls me over, and P.S. that's happened a few times if I've gone a little too fast in my Buick wagon.
Right.
I have never had to worry. And I want my friends' kids, again, those who don't look like me, to not grow up in fear. And that's how I feel.
It's important to hear you expand upon that. And I think it's really important for the conversation to expand into white communities, right? White communities that have never had to have this conversation. That's part of what I think is happening now. And, you know, I've tried to do my best to focus on race in this show and to have conversations about race and class and other divisions that frankly, you know, don't get covered enough in my view. But I think, you know, your sensitivity and your personal candor will help us roll through that and grow from that. But I want to ask you about another component of this, Brooke. You're at CNN, right? Which is right now the target for the president, right? Like my wife used to be really concerned when I would go in to do your show, Chris's show, especially when Trump was really bombing away on CNN. She would say, I'm worried about you. Like that walk from the car or the subway into CNN, right? Or even being in the lobby. And I was, you know, I used to be more cavalier about it, frankly, when I didn't have kids. But now that I have kids, you know, I knew that the president was attacking your network. He's attacking your colleagues. He's attacking Zucker, who leads the network. What is it like for you to be in the chair and have the commander in chief, you know, the leader of the free world, attacking you and everything you're working with?
I will say that in my 20 years of journalism, I have never had to be walked out of the building with a security guard every single day as I have the last 3 years. I will say that, you know, I got into this business. I went to Carolina. I did Spanish and journalism. I got into this business to tell stories. I wanted to listen. I wanted to have a front row seat to history. And my goodness, you know, 20 years later, to be in that chair for an hour, 2 hours a day, having to fact check at a pace that no one ever thought probably possible, feasible, to see what the president is doing, is saying, how he's dividing, hurts on one level just as a human to one's soul. As a journalist, though, I have never, ever been more proud of sitting in that damn chair and telling the truth. And I have never been high-fived or hugged in an airport or walking down the street by strangers in my life as I have the last few years. And I believe that the way he's tried to turn us into the quote-unquote enemy has backfired. And I think people, Americans who believe in democracy, who believe in right and wrong, who believe in, you know, having an open mind, appreciate the role we play and know that it has never been more vital. And I appreciate that.
I appreciate you. And I appreciate the fact that, you know, that you're helping us humanize it, because I think especially under the rampage of the president's tweets or the assaults on your patriotism, people forget that you're human beings and that you have families and you have people that care about you. And there are more stories than you can ever share or your colleagues can ever share, some of which that I've heard, you know, in private conversations about the degree of threat that you all face. You know, you're all you don't want to be the story, but I think at some point someone will tell the story about the types of threats. It's almost like we'll never know how many people tried to take a shot at the president because the Secret Service keeps it all quiet, right? We'll never know how many terrorist attacks were prevented in New York and DC. The public will never know how many attacks or threats have been waged at you, your colleagues, your buildings, right? And I will say that because I know it. And you all can't always say it. It's almost like you're in the military. Like you can't say it while you're on active duty, but you know, other folks can. So I want to make sure that that is noted and people understand that. But the show is called Angry Americans. We say if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. There's more anger now in America than maybe ever in our lifetimes. And this show is about turning that righteous anger into positive impact in the same way the founders did, or Martin Luther King did, or you do on your show. So Brooke Baldwin, what makes you angry?
What makes me angry? I think number one, just injustice, unfairness, people getting in trouble, and that can be translated a million different ways, just for something that they had nothing to do with, or something that they didn't do wrong. Just seeing that injustice in the world really pisses me off. I think also what angers me is closed-mindedness. The people who live in their one place and they have friends that look and believe and sound like them, and they don't want to hear another perspective, and they watch the TV channel that just furthers that perspective, and they don't have open ears and an open mind. That angers me. And lastly, what angers me, Paul, is just people who do have an opinion, people who are pissed off, but who are like, deuces, I'm not going to vote. What's the point of voting? Like, vote.
Yeah.
Vote.
Yeah. You've also, you've quietly and humbly led by example, I think, throughout your career. And I've seen that in the way you interact with people off camera. I've seen that just knowing you from a distance. But you kind of grind it out. I mean, you started in the local news networks. You were in West Virginia, and now you're on the biggest stage in the world at CNN. And now you can see that you were steeled by those experiences as you go through something like the virus. But for folks right now that are listening, and maybe they have the virus, maybe they are unemployed, maybe they are trying to figure out what's next, and they're going through a rough spot. You're someone who's gone through a lot of rough spots, and you've come out on the other side. What's your advice for them, or your lessons learned?
I would say lean on those you love. I think back to, again, vulnerability. You have to be open. You have to acknowledge. Don't just, if you're out of work, or if you're feeling really sick, don't walk around like everything's fine. Let people know who you can trust. Let them in. Let them know what's going on with you. And I think in your vulnerability, you're going to connect with these people, and then people want to help. People at the end of the day, like, they just want to be seen and heard, and folks want to help. And so if you let someone in on how you could use their help, I would bet that they would find a way. Or if they can't find a way, their, uncle's friend who maybe works at that place, who he had heard maybe there may be some jobs, or here, my buddy over at the hospital said, I may be able to get an appointment. You just have to ask. And then I think my other piece of advice, and this is a little woo-woo, but I've really come into this in the last couple of years, like deep breathing. If you are feeling like, my gosh, like the last week, if you're feeling all the things and the feels, and you're just like, your heart's racing and you're feeling super stressed out, take 5 minutes. Just start with 5. Close your eyes and just deep breathe. And there's something with the nervous system. It does the thing and the thing and the thing that makes me feel so much better. Do that first thing in the morning or before you go to bed. And I'm telling you, it'll just help bring about that clarity to then give you the vulnerability to ask for the help. That's my advice.
That's such good advice. I mean, I know that I went through times in my life. I remember when I was, struggling to fundraise for IAVA, and, I talked to a mentor of mine, and he said, dude, you're not asking for money. People see you on CNN. You guys have, all these people who are out there fighting. They don't think you need money. You have to ask for help. And in the same way, when I came home from Iraq and I was struggling with transitioning, people look at me and say, I'm a big dude, I'm a tough dude. I was in the military. If I don't ask for help, people are going to think, shit, like I'm worse off than he is. Right.
Yep. Think that they look at you, you give off the appearance that you're fine. I'm cool. I don't need help. See ya.
Yeah. It's part of what we tackled with mental health, especially is letting people know that it's a sign of strength to ask for help. And yes. I really believe that. And the breathing, Brooke,
do you do that?
I do it. I used to tell people that worked with me, you know, before you go into a room, take a breath. Like just stop and take a breath. Yes. And especially I remember when we were going for, you know, battles in Washington or even going on CNN, like that shit is stressful. Like now I've kind of getting used to it, but just stopping and taking a breath and refocusing. Yep. And especially before I go into a room. I mean, somebody gave me advice also when I was at the White House once, the first time I went. I said, you know, do you have any advice? And he said, yeah, walk slow. Walk slow and like soak it in and take a breath and don't just go rolling into the Roosevelt room. Like take a breath. And that breathing really does matter. And I think that
it does.
You're a great coach. I wish, I know maybe I've told you this offline. I wish you had a late night show all the time. Like a version of you and Don, but I love Don, but Don's got his thing. But like without the suits, without the desks, like, you know,
to just kick it and be real and yeah.
So I'll send a note to Zucker.
Send a note to Zucker.
Yeah.
Attention, Jeff Zucker. No, I've totally.
But you know, I think that late night, you know, gig that you guys do is really important because they get to see you as people. And I think you get to feel the love from the community, but you bring a joy to everything you do, Brooke. So I want to ask you another question I ask of all of our Brooke Baldwin, what makes you happy?
What makes me happy? Being anywhere near the water. Again, this is coming from a landlocked Atlanta native. So being anywhere near, on, by, over the water, or in nature. Like I got married on a farm in upstate New York. I just dig it. What else makes me happy? My dog. I have this little, almost 17-year-old pug. This is my first dog I have ever had. First and only in my life. I got him when I was 23. I just moved to West Virginia. I had just moved out of my corporate housing, which was the Ramada Inn and Suites, and very bougie, and moved into my new apartment in Huntington, West Virginia. And I got this little pug because I was lonely. And this little fur ball, man, he has kept me. He has licked many a tears, and he's been with me for 17 years, and God bless. I hope this little guy lives forever, and because it's not gonna be pretty when he doesn't. And I think what makes me happy is that feeling right after a good sweat. Like, man, like working hard, whatever it is that I do, I just love pushing my body, and then at the end just feeling that clearness that I kicked my ass, so now I can just like revel in it and just remind myself how strong I am. And I work out every morning, and I just know that I can take on, it really is like a mental thing. You know, I'm like, all right, if I can do this in the morning, whatever I have going on the rest of the day, I got this. That makes me happy.
I have a very important follow-up question. What is your dog's name?
Okay, before I tell you my dog's name, again, recognize that I was 23, and I thought this was super cute. He is a pug. His name is Pugsley, which I thought was adorable, but I have been friends lately. They're like, if you have a baby, you're going to name it Babesley. Like, where's your sense of originality, you know? And I mean, I call him all the things because he lost his hearing, I don't know how many years ago. So, but Pugsley, little Pugsley Baldwin.
It was a notable admission to your answer, but and that's much less embarrassing. That Pugsley is like a totally acceptable, expected name for.
Yeah, but I've met like 17 Pugsleys in my lifetime of the pugs. So, come on, Brooke. Come on.
I love it. Pugsley deserves his show or her show. Is it a boy or girl?
His.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Pugsley should definitely. I think that all CNN. Personalities, anchors. What do we call you guys now?
Journalists.
Journalists. Okay.
Anchors. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I see it used interchangeably, right? Like, not everyone on CNN is a journalist, right? Like some people are analysts.
Well, I would say, you're an analyst or a commentator or commentator, analyst, or an anchor or a correspondent.
Right. So I think all of you should bring dogs. I think all of you should bring dogs as often because people are sick of seeing fucking burning buildings and people screaming at each other.
I present to you my pug. Now everyone's
They're sick of looking at Trump. And, today I think is the counter programming war will begin. I'll be interested to see how you and others cover that. As I've been recommending that if Biden and his allies want to really start to regain the conversation, just go live every day. And he should turn into basically Ellen and bring in a different friend every day. And today bring in Barack Obama, and tomorrow bring in Michelle Obama, and the next day bring in Jay-Z.
Yeah.
Just flood the zone with alternative programming, right?
Yeah.
And force you guys as CNN and the other journalists and analysts and commentators to choose or to run both of them, because right now Trump's just flooding the zone and there's a void of leadership, I think, but also a content void. So, you know, that's my recommendation for programming at CNN and for the future potential president of the United States.
Duly noted.
Yeah. But you have been incredibly generous with your time and with your wisdom and with your energy. And I have to come to the point in the show where we'd normally be at the Classic Car Club and we'd be having a drink. And you're by the way, Rosie Perez, her choice was also champagne. I think she was the only other guest in 62 episodes who chose champagne.
Well, it's kind of cheating because if you ask for a cocktail, like, you know, I get
it's any drink. It's any drink. I usually drink or
like just quickly, my deal with champagne is I always thought it was the drink for fancy people, and then I covered. I won't get into it, but I covered a horrible story maybe 8-9 years ago, and I was like, damn, life is too bleeping short. So I'm just gonna drink champagne whenever I want to.
I think you need to drink. It's America. Drink what you want. Like, you can drink the fancy
steak
stuff.
And champagne.
You're expanding my horizon. Part of drinking and America and smoking and socializing and all of it that we used to do so much more of is about sharing, right? So part of what I ask is because I think it'll give people ideas. It'll give people, you know, ways to connect. It'll let them understand a little bit more about you. So I feel like, you know, team. We were playing Rummy Cube the other night, and somebody said, we're part of Team Pain. And I was like, what does that mean? Like Team Champagne. And I was like, okay.
Team Pain.
I guess I'm in Team Ski because I drink whiskey. But you can officially be the president of Team Pain. So with that, I have to give you a presentation of some gifts that I'll send to you through the security apparatus somehow. But first is some Angry American flag. I spilled a little champagne on it, actually, because when I popped the cork in my garage, it almost took the window. It almost took the window out of the Camaro. So there's that. And then the sponsor of our show is Bravo Sierra. They make military tested wellness and hygiene products, and there's a microbacterial wipe and deodorant, all kinds of stuff you can use after you run. Or, you know, you can give it to Pugsley if he needs it brushing. And then I always try to think about, you know, something to give the guests. We usually pick an American-inspired whiskey. And I was trying to think about what the heck do I get Brooke Baldwin? Because I can't just get you a whiskey. And so I found something that I really like. And I also think it's fun, and it's kind of a spin on whiskey. And it's Rock and Rye. Have you tried Rock and Rye?
No.
So it's Rock and Rye. It's Union made, with rye whiskey, raw honey, navel orange, rock candy, and bitters. It's old school shit that I guess they're bringing back. They make it in Philadelphia, and it's just awesome, and it's a good time, and it's packs a punch, and it's got good history. So I think it's fitting for the great Brooke Baldwin, who brings all those things. And then lastly,
I love it.
The final presentation of gifts. Yeah, so this is a thing on the show. If you haven't seen it yet, we present 3 colors of Peeps. We've been doing it since the beginning of Angry Americans. Yellow, blue, or pink. Which color would you pick, Brooke Baldwin, and why?
Blue, because it looks like Carolina blue, and that's where I went to college.
Dude.
And I'm hoping it turns my tongue blue because that's fun.
Well, I got to ask you before we go. So there's the NBA may be coming back. You're a big basketball fan. What are your thoughts on? We had David Aldridge on a couple weeks ago. You're a great sports fan. What do you think on the state of affairs here? And you know, are we going to see Carolina basketball this year?
You know who texted me the other day was Roy Williams, the coach of our basketball team.
Excuse me. Roy Williams just texts you from time to time. When you're drinking champagne with Don Lemon, you know.
So you know, when Roy texted me, no, I mean. Like we didn't have the best team, so it's okay. You know, we didn't really have a season. But no, I think, listen, like sports is a great pastime, and I love college hoops, and it's been such a bummer. I'm sure that the NBA, and trying to figure out how they're going to pull it off, will do so in hopefully the safest way possible. It's like this catch-22 though, because it's, these guys want to play and people want to pay attention, but man, it's also privilege because they'll have to be probably tested every day, and you think about what could, how those tests could be otherwise used. But I don't know. I defer to Adam Silver and however they figure out how to pull it off. But of course we miss sports. We miss just those regular things in our lives, right, that we took so totally for granted. So I hope it comes back just in a safe way.
Well, we will be rooting for that, and we will continue to root for you. And
rooting for you too, friend.
I want to thank you for all of your leadership, because a lot of leadership, in my view, is about sacrifice. And everybody sees the bright lights and the fancy studios and the fancy wardrobe back there, but they don't always see the hard work and the sacrifice and what you give up. You're always a person who really does commit to telling the stories of others. You've told so many stories of people who didn't have a voice, and there are probably dozens of clips on YouTube of Brooke Baldwin emotionally reacting to a guest and having a guest, and I don't see that with anybody else. And it's because you keep it real and because you do tell people's stories. So my deepest thanks to you, my friend, for your leadership. I'm glad you're healthy. We're going to need you now more than ever.
Yes.
And I hope by the time we get to New Year's Eve, it'll be a different.
We'll be tying a few on this year. Let me tell you what. I've already started sweating. Like, man, they better have a bar open, or we'll commission some. We'll sit in my kitchen if we have to, but we will be on the air. Don Lemon and myself.
I love it.
Being a little ridiculous and saying bye-bye to 2020.
I love it. Well, if it's possible, I've told Cuomo I want to bring the Camaro on a tour after this is all over. So
yes.
I'm going to take the Camaro with Cuomo and drive through Times Square and high-five his brother. And then maybe we can take it down to New Orleans, and I'll do the driving. You and Don can hang out. We'll put the top down. We'll go down Bourbon Street.
I love it. I can't wait. Something to look forward to.
Thank you,
Paul Rykoff, you are a gem. Thank you so much for asking me to come on.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Brooke. Stay frosty.
Thank you.